to this week's edition of Happy Veg Animal News Recap. I've taken the time to scour the internet, as always, and educate myself on the top news stories involving animals for the week. So I've got a couple that I've selected to kind of discuss with you guys and give a little bit of my opinion, as well as hopefully open some dialogue, in the comment section or whatever. So this week, though, I want to start things off on a more positive note and discuss a couple good things that happened in the world of animals this week. So first of those stories is Ringling Brothers. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Ringling Brothers, the greatest show on earth. 146 years in operation. They had their last show this past week. So what does this mean? This means no more exotic animals that are being, tortured in the name of training and human entertainment and being forced to perform like they often do in the wild. So, congratulations, amazing, goodbye, see you, so long. You look at things like Cirque du Soleil, they don't use animals. They're flipping and flying, and they put on an amazing show without animals. So, sorry that your industry built around torturing animals is done for, but maybe you can recollect and come out as, go in a different direction that doesn't involve profiting off of exploitation of animals. So long, goodbye, Ringling Brothers. Take care. Second story, Germany has banned fur farming. Now, this is definitely a positive story. I don't know if you guys are really heavily involved in the fur farming industry or know a lot about it, but typically the animals that are farmed for fur are not utilized in any other way, which is to say that they're only bred for their skin. But minks, for example, you don't eat mink. It's aside from being in the wild, the only reason they utilize mink is for fur. So your disgusting fur coat is literally the animal was not even utilized. If you're gonna kill something, utilize it. That's the only way you can justify it to me. Skinning an animal just for a coat is not justifiable by any means. So, definitely amazing. Definitely, there's not too many fur farms left in Germany from what the article stated, but they're going to be going through a transitional period over the next 5 years. And in that 5 years, it doesn't really say what a transition period is, but I'm assuming that means transitioning from fur farming to whatever these new mandated rules are and adapting your business so that you're no longer fur farming. So either way, thumbs up, Germany, congratulations, and that's amazing. I think the whole world should be fur farm free as far as I'm concerned, because there's just no necessity in it. When you look at synthetics, how they are now, there's absolutely no reason to actually wear animals except to, in my opinion, show off money. And frankly, there's charities that you could be donating that money to as opposed to splurging on the skinned remains of animals. But anyway, those are my two positive news stories this week. Ringling Brothers, Germany, so let's dive into the week's 3 topics. Topic of the week. This is actually much more disturbed. This is probably the deepest and grossest topic that I've had to talk about so far. So this one's a little bit, hard on the ears. And I mean in an emotional way. So I read a story this week. As always, all the links to all the articles and where I get my information, check it out in the bio. Follow the links. Check out the original stories. Perhaps leave your commentary below. I'd love to hear from you guys what you think. There was a story about veterinarians in Canada and how there's no rule or way to deal with the euthanization of a healthy pet. So what the article kind of said, it was from different veterinarians who were discussing the topic or whatever, they were saying things along the lines of it's not ruled against. It's a gray area. There's no actual rule in the veterinary code of conduct that suggests how to deal with people trying to put down pets that are not in need of euthanasia. For example, if your pet is terminally ill or it's just extremely old and it's falling, various illnesses will start to take effect, arthritis, things that are just hard for the animal to, that's when you consider euthanasia. But what I'm talking about is more along the lines of moving and not wanting to keep your pet, or the dog's just getting a tiny bit older and you want a new puppy for the kids, or trivial reasons, things that are not justifiable by euthanasia. And in the article, it said that this is actually still happening, that veterinarians, in my opinion, because it's a paid service, that, veterinarians have a choice whether their ethics will come into play, and they'll say, no, I'm not willing to euthanize your pet under these pretenses, or they'll do it for the money, for the money for the business or whatever else, but they'll euthanize a healthy pet. And nothing, from what the article stated, nothing really comes of that. There's no, follow-up, as far as a legal standpoint. Why did you euthanize your pet? Why did you, what were the circumstances surrounding the euthanasia? Why did you feel the need to euthanize your pet under these circumstances? And here's my problem. Animals, as the article said also, it said that animals are still kind of viewed more as property as opposed to sentient living beings. So with that in mind, property can be disposed of in a manner that, people who have heart probably can't understand, but you can still, in this day and age, you can still bring an animal, bring it to the veterinary hospital and have it put down, so long as your veterinarian has no ethics and is willing to do something like that, because there's no rule saying not to, then they'll actually put your pet down because you don't want it anymore. Now, here's my problem. I feel like when you get into a profession, especially one that requires so much schooling, one that you have to be extremely invested in, doctors, veterinary technicians, even nursing, any profession like that where you're responsible for caring for a living being, okay? I feel like if you go into that and you put that much effort into it, in my mind, you should be most concerned with the animal's well-being, or doctors, with their patients' well-being. But the interests of the animal should always, in my opinion, they should be number one. So to think that even though there's no rule that says how to handle the situation, to think that there are veterinarians that are out there potentially euthanizing pets for what? How much does it cost? I've never had to euthanize a pet, $150. So $150 will make you, in my opinion, abuse your title and take advantage of a situation, and as if that animal's life is not valuable enough to put you on edge about doing something like that. To me, if you're a veterinarian, your primary concern should always be animals. So why, especially going right back to the code of conduct, why is there nothing in there about that? Why is there nothing that states how to handle that sort of situation? Because on a global, or on a national level, that should not be allowed. And not to mention, I've often said that putting a ban on owning animals or fines, I've often said that those are not appropriate crimes for animal cruelty. But for bringing your pet in to try and euthanize it for a trivial reason, I feel like that's an immediate ban on owning animals. There should be no more. You don't deserve to have a pet if you're so willing to throw that relationship away for something that's probably quite trivial. So, going right back to the top of this chain, there needs to be something put in place. The group that runs or puts these codes of the veterinarian gods, however that works, there should be something in place already that states how to deal with a situation that apparently still happens, and a situation that, is going to call somebody's morals into play. And if it's that deep of a situation, there should be a policy on how to handle it. And then it trickles down to the veterinarians. If your primary focus and you care about, animals are your number one, you care about the animals, you want to see animals healthy, you want to see them happy in good homes, why would there still be any veterinarians? To me, that's an abuse of your power, your title, the capabilities you have. An animal is being brought to you who is in distress, you help it, you try to get it, you do what you can to make sure that it's taken care of. If an animal is brought to you and it's 100% healthy, there should be no questioning what to do in that situation. It should be a removal of the animal. It should be an attempt at rehoming, always. There should always be an attempt on rehoming. If the animal is perfectly healthy and these people are willing to put it down, if you're giving it back to them, what are the chances they're not going to do the same thing? They're not going to find somebody else. It's your duty to me, as a respectable veterinarian, somebody who takes their job, but also their responsibility to animals very seriously. Take the animal. In my opinion, report. There should be a way, as far as the law system goes, like the judicials of things, there should be a way to report that as, attempted animal cruelty. So where there would be an immediate ban on animals, put into play. These people go to try and get another pet and they're told, under the circumstances of your last attempt at euthanasia, you've been put on a 5-10 year ban on owning animals. And so be it. But, this story really, really fries me up because, anybody you go to who is offering to take care of you in some way or another, even to your bartender, you trust your bartender to give you what you pay for. You trust your bartender to mix your drinks appropriately. You trust them not to put anything in your drinks that's not stated, right down to that, all the way up to a veterinary technician or a veterinarian, somebody who's responsible for taking care of your pets. I feel like there should be a rule stating that euthanasia of healthy pets is not acceptable. I feel like veterinarians across the board should all be, even without a rule, should all be on the same page as far as like, no, that's not acceptable. We'll take the pet and we will try to find a new home. And, euthanasia has to be a last resort. I don't agree with putting down animals, but at the same time, under the pretenses of what they, think to be acceptable or whatever else, I can see how they can think that that's the correct direction to take, but that's beside the point. This story trickles down to put a rule in place, even right up to, the law system, the federal system that says you can be reported for trying to euthanize a healthy pet, down to the veterinary head honchos who say, okay, here's how to handle somebody, here's what you do. You take the pet, you report it, etc., etc. And then you go to the veterinarians themselves, who have all collectively agreed that that is no longer tolerated, regardless of whether there's a rule or not. The $150 is not worth an animal's life. And then it goes down to the owner. Point blank, if you don't want to take care of an animal, don't get one. Don't put the animal through it, and don't put, the veterinarian in that sort of moral predicament. So that's our next story. And coincidentally, this actually ties together all of my positive vibe stories, like a little bit from both. It all culminates into a not so great story. Ringling Brothers closing positive, Ringling Brothers negative coming right up. So it's being rumored that they are applying for an Endangered Species Act permit, which would basically allow them to send, I think the number was 8, send 8 of their tigers back to Germany, to a Germany circus, where they would continue to perform. There are several animal advocacy groups that are petitioning against that, and there's a group called Animal Legal Defense Fund, and it's an advocacy group that fights on a legal level for animals. They're planning, obviously, to oppose the permit through court and whatever else. Here's the problem. You have already had these animals. Your show has been operating for 146 years. 146 years that you have exploited animals, you have profited off them, and what have they ever gained from that? They don't get paid. They don't receive any kind of monetary gain from that. They're fed to stay alive, and they're, whipped and beaten and, forced to jump through fiery hoops, none of which is natural to them, none of which should ever have happened to them. So, coming from that angle, it's extremely disgusting that they're looking to get, in my opinion, it's likely for profit. There's probably some sort of financial gain they get from sending those tigers back. I would assume anyway, but that's, just my opinion. But giving them this permit and allowing these animals to be flown, put through the stress of having to fly, and now they're going to be reintroduced to the circus life and have to redo and retrain and all of those horrible things that happened to them for however many years they were forced to be in the circus. It just says a lot about Ringling Brothers to me, and how little they must actually care about animals. Like, it's evident in the fact that they force them to perform, but on this level, it's disgusting to think that they can't take the remainder of the animals that they have and send them to a sanctuary. Let them live out the last part of their life walking on the grass, swimming, feeling the rain, any of those things. Like, it just makes Ringling Brothers to me look even worse. It paints a very negative picture of their intentions. And you know what? You've already just accept defeat. You've lost. You know, nobody wants to see animals performing like that anymore. It's time to give it up. And in the last ditch effort, you're gonna try and profit somehow off. I don't know. The whole thing is just messed up. And frankly, if I was Ringling Brothers, I would just accept the fact that it's game over. Move on. Collect yourselves. Start figuring out what your next, your parent company can start figuring out what your next direction is. But to be sending these animals who have already loyally performed for you for X amount of years, 10, 20, 30, I don't know, however many years they've been forced to do this, the least you could do for them is send them to a sanctuary. It likely costs nothing to bring them there. Or if it does, it's the very least that you could do for these animals who have, been forced to perform for you for however many years. It's just disgusting to me. And when you look at Ringling Brothers closing, you're looking at this as like a positive thing, but sometimes these stories they're never 100% positive. It's a 360. So you've got, yeah, they're closing, but they're going to send all their animals back into this torturous industry. So, hopefully the permit gets denied. Hopefully these animal advocacy groups get through and they're able to oppose and have the permit denied and get those animals sent to a sanctuary. Because after, again, as I said, after however many years they've been forced to dance and walk on two legs for our entertainment, the least we can do is send them somewhere where they can live out the rest of their lives in peace. And that's what I think about that. So screw you, Ringling Brothers. Last topic of the day. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a picture of like a tigon or a liger online. Particularly, there was one that really freaked me out, and it was like this big albino tiger-looking animal with like a lion's mane, but its face was like melting, just sagging, and it looked so droopy, and it looked lost. And, people are saying right now that that's the direct result of crossbreeding, breeding these animals, and the article called them Frankencats. So breeding these Frankencats, these animals that, are being born with health defects. They're being born with heart problems, with dwarfism, with all sorts of like just known problems, things that are, primarily going to happen, illnesses and, again, defects, like I said. So things that happen through the crossbreeding, okay? And right now there's a coalition of activists in the States that are looking to have Frankencat breeding banned. Right now, at this very moment, there's approximately 3,000 like unaccredited roadside zoos operating throughout the States. So 3,000 of these roadside zoos could all be crossbreeding and creating these animals that are drawing in donations, drawing in money, bringing tourists in, knowing that the animals likely have health problems, likely have, when you don't look at an animal that has dwarfism and think that you've done something right. So you know that there's a problem, okay? So, to put that in perspective, if there's 3,000 roadside zoos operating right now, and they're doing so illegally, if they've not been discovered by now or like exposed, then I'm not understanding. I can't see how like you can outlaw it, but I mean just the same as putting a ban on owning animals. You can't 100% guarantee that somebody's not going to end up with an animal. So how do we monitor it? How do you find out? Do you, at this point I feel like if these zoos were operating without the proper permits and licenses and knowledgeable staff, if they weren't operating with that sort of thing and they haven't been discovered by now, I'm not understanding how you're going to outlaw it without first exposing these operations. I mean, if they're not operating legally, how can they be operating at all? So they're obviously not being heavily monitored. So hopefully through this being brought out to light and looking to ban this sort of practice of breeding these animals that are obviously going to be very sick and deformed and ill and not live very long, or whatever the case may be, and simply for profit. It's not helping conservation, it's not helping repopulation, because these animals never existed. So you're not doing any benefit to the population of a species or the conservation of a species if you're breeding animals that never really existed to begin with. So, you know, in my opinion, obviously, there should be, if you're a zoo operating and you have all the proper business licenses and everything, you're being monitored. Somebody's coming to renew those. Somebody's coming to check. So people need to be going out. We need to be exposing even the police who might have a mild understanding of the situation. They should be out there. Somebody should be monitoring. How can 3,000 businesses doing this same thing, breeding, now they may not all be breeding these animals, there may be a couple of these roadside zoos that have the best intentions, but without, if you're unaccredited and you don't have the proper permits and licenses and responsible staff that are aware of how to take care of animals like this, you know, science involved people who understand the breeding and, you know, of these sorts of animals, you're going to end up with sick animals that are mutated, that are, you know, you're not helping anybody by doing that. So I totally agree. I'm on board with the banning of these, you know, banning, first of all, of the crossbreeding of these animals, but secondly, on the exposing and shutting down of roadside zoos that are breeding animals that are not natural like that. So definitely on board with that. You know, if in a zoo, if you're not like, and especially in the case of pandas, if you look at the Toronto Zoo recently, they had those panda babies, so cute. And those panda babies, you know, they're repopulating. They're doing this for conservation. They're looking to repopulate the species. You don't have to agree with zoos, but you can agree with that part of it, okay? But when you look at a roadside zoo, they're breeding animals for profit, animals that are sick, dying, you know, mutated. There's nothing acceptable about that. So I'm hoping the next time I talk about this story, it's going to be about how, you know, a lot of these roadside zoos has been shut down or forced to get the proper documents, or, you know, stop, or at least we're forced to stop breeding the animals under those pretenses, especially in the case of profit. But it all ties into how, you know, a lot of these stories tie into how money will have you looking at an animal as though it's not a living creature, it's just a commodity. And when you can profit off of something, sometimes you don't have the moral compass that somebody in my position has, where I'm just looking at it from the outside. But, you know, at the end of the day, hopefully we do see an end to that. Hopefully we see roadside zoos kind of stepping up to get the proper documents or being shut down. Hopefully we see an end to those Frankencats, because I'm telling you, Google it. Frankencats or ligers or tigans, Google it. And some of the pictures you see will scream animal abuse to you. Like, you won't be able to get the image out of your head of those poor, sick-looking, you know, animals. Anyways, this rounds up this week's edition of Happy Veg Animal News Recap. Make sure to check back next week for 3 new topics and hopefully a few more positive ones. And again, check out all the links to the original stories and the bios below, as well as the link to my blog, Everything Vegetarian, all in one stop. Happy Veg. Check me out.